I remember the early days of my pregnancy with so much joy. The moment I found out I was expecting, I could hardly contain my excitement. It felt like a dream come true. Becoming a mother was something I had always longed for. My husband, James, and I had been together for several years by then. We had built a life that felt perfect to me. He was supportive, loving, and we had dreams of our future together. We had a small, cozy apartment that we had made our own. I had stopped working, having made the decision that it would be best for me to stay home, focus on the pregnancy, and prepare for the arrival of our little one. James worked hard every day, and we had agreed that he would be the one to provide for our family while I focused on taking care of our home. Life felt simple and steady. My days were spent shopping for baby clothes, setting up the nursery, and dreaming about what our life would look like with our child. For the first few months, everything seemed perfect. My husband was always there, always asking about my day, always eager to help me as I navigated the changes that came with pregnancy. We were in sync, happy, planning, and hopeful. It seemed like we had everything figured out. But as the weeks passed, I began to notice subtle shifts. At first, they were so small that I brushed them off. James started coming home a little later from work, his eyes often distant as if lost in thought. He no longer seemed as present as he had been. At first, I thought it was just the pressure of his job, that he was stressed about providing for our growing family. But as time went on, the changes became more pronounced. He would spend more and more time away from home, sometimes coming home late at night without offering much of an explanation. I noticed how his attention was slipping away from me, how he seemed to be more focused on his phone or his work. I tried not to think about it too much. After all, he had been so supportive and loving for so long, there was no reason for me to doubt him. But my heart began to feel heavy. Something inside me told me that something wasn't right. I wanted to ignore it, to tell myself that it was all in my head, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing him. The warmth and connection we once had seemed to be slipping through my fingers, like sand in the wind. One evening, I asked him about his day, trying to reconnect, to make him talk to me like he used to. His response was short, distracted, and I could see that something was off, even though he didn't say anything specific. I couldn't help but feel a gnawing fear inside of me, a fear that perhaps things weren't as perfect as I had imagined. The first sign that something was deeply wrong came when James stopped coming home for dinner as frequently. I remember one night when I sat down alone at the table, waiting for him to come home, my pregnancy belly heavy and my mind filled with a strange mix of anticipation and dread. I stared at the empty seat across from me, wondering where he was, wondering what had happened to the man I thought I knew. When he finally came home, it was late. He didn't seem surprised to find me waiting, but the way he looked at me, distant, almost detached, sent a chill through me. He kissed me on the cheek as he walked past, not bothering to sit with me. My stomach dropped, and I knew right then that something was different. I just couldn't pinpoint what. The days that followed were filled with more of the same, his distance, his late nights, the silence that grew between us. I didn't know how to bring it up, how to ask him what was wrong. Every time I tried, he would brush me off or change the subject. The man I had known so well seemed to be slipping away, and I couldn't figure out why. I told myself that it was just a phase, that things would get better once the baby arrived. I convinced myself that he was just stressed, or maybe dealing with something at work that he didn't want to share. But deep down, I knew there was more to it than that. I felt it in my bones, and every time I asked him what was wrong, the silence between us grew even louder. One morning, I woke up early, my thoughts heavy with doubt and worry. I walked into the kitchen to find James already up, his back to me as he prepared his breakfast. I stood there for a moment, watching him, trying to understand the man I had once known. He was lost in his thoughts, distant, a stranger in the life we had built together. And that was the moment I knew. Something was happening, something I didn't fully understand yet, but I could feel it in my gut. This wasn't just stress or a temporary phase. It was something much deeper. The man I thought I knew was slipping away, and I couldn't stop it. It was an ordinary afternoon when everything shifted. I had been sitting in the living room, reading through a baby book that had been given to me by a friend, its pages full of advice and pictures of infants that filled me with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. I was so close to meeting our baby, so close to finally holding our little one in my arms. Yet, the familiar feeling of unease was slowly eating away at me, gnawing at my stomach every day. James hadn't been himself for weeks. I tried to ignore it, but there were moments when I couldn't avoid it any longer. I had grown used to him coming home later, to him being distracted, to him not showing the same affection he once had. It was as though he was there, but not really there. I felt more alone than I had ever felt in my life, despite having him under the same roof. I was startled when the front door opened early that day, much earlier than usual. I had expected him to stay at work until late in the evening, but here he was, standing in the doorway, looking disheveled and distant. He didn't even look at me as he walked past. He was already heading toward the bedroom, moving quickly, as if he had no time to acknowledge my presence. I stood up from the couch, confused by his abruptness, and called out to him, "James, what's going on? Why are you home early?" He didn't respond right away. He simply continued to gather his things. He walked to the closet, opened it, and began pulling out his clothes, stuffing them hastily into a suitcase. His movements were frantic, too urgent for something that didn't feel right. My heart skipped a beat as I stood frozen in place. I watched him in disbelief, unable to make sense of what was happening. "James, what are you doing?" I asked again, my voice trembling now. My mind was racing, trying to piece together what was going on, but nothing made sense. Why was he packing? Was he going somewhere? He ignored me, still moving quickly, still not looking at me. The sound of the suitcase zipping open and closed was deafening, filling the silence in the room with an air of finality. I felt like I was suffocating as the knot in my chest tightened. "What are you doing, James? Where are you going?" I asked, my voice breaking. This time, I wasn't going to let him dismiss me. I needed answers. Finally, he stopped packing, turned toward me, and spoke in the most nonchalant voice, as if this was something he had prepared himself for. "I'm leaving. I'm going to live in another country with her." The words hit me like a wave, crashing into my chest with an intensity that stole the breath from my lungs. I stood there, rooted to the spot, unable to move or speak. Another country. With her. The questions flew into my mind, faster than I could process them. But before I could gather my thoughts, my voice broke through the confusion. "Who? Who is she?" I demanded. James didn't answer immediately, his face giving nothing away. It was as if he had rehearsed this moment in his mind, as if he had already made his peace with it. The silence between us stretched out, each second dragging like an eternity. I could barely process the enormity of what he had just told me. "I'm leaving for her, okay? That's it," he said, his tone flat, emotionless. "I'm going." I couldn't breathe. The air seemed thick with disbelief, and for a moment, I wondered if I was dreaming. The words James had spoken echoed in my mind, but I couldn't make sense of them. He was leaving. He was leaving me. And with her. I stood there in the middle of our apartment, unable to move, my mind reeling as the reality of his betrayal set in. My legs felt weak, my body shaking. It was as if I had been blindsided by a storm that had appeared out of nowhere. I couldn't grasp the situation. It didn't feel real. This wasn't the man I had known, the man who had promised to stand by me, who had helped me through everything, who had shared dreams of building a family. This man standing before me was someone unrecognizable. My heart pounded in my chest, and I tried to keep my voice steady as I asked the question that had been on the tip of my tongue since this whole ordeal began. Where did the money come from? I asked, my voice trembling. The question caught me off guard at first, but as soon as the words left my mouth, I knew I had to ask. Something was wrong, something I hadn't realized until now. James stopped packing for a brief moment, his eyes narrowing as if he had expected this question. Then, in the most casual tone, he replied, "It's from your account." I froze, my mind struggling to understand what he was saying. My account? I hadn't thought to question our finances before. We had always shared everything. How could I have been so naive? I withdrew it, he continued, his voice cold, indifferent. It's my money, you know. You haven't worked since we've been married. All of that, those savings, that's from my money, so I took it. You should have been more careful with your own finances. It felt like a slap to my face, each word digging deeper than the last. His money. The money I had saved for our future, money that I thought was for our child, was suddenly his. He was justifying it as if it was a normal thing to do. I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall just yet. I couldn't let him see how much his betrayal was affecting me, even though it was shattering me inside. I was pregnant, vulnerable, and he was walking away from me, taking everything, without a second thought. You took my money. I whispered, the disbelief still clouding my voice. My stomach twisted with every syllable. Does it really matter now? He asked, his voice flat. I'm leaving. I've made up my mind. His words pierced through me like cold, unfeeling blades. I could feel the weight of the situation crushing me. The man I loved, the father of my child, was abandoning me for another woman, and now he was stealing from me, as if I didn't matter. I stood there, my heart aching, as the full weight of what was happening crashed down on me. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that the man I had given everything to, the man I had trusted with my heart and soul, was standing in front of me, cold and distant, telling me that he was leaving. He was going to live with her, in another country. He had already withdrawn all the money I had saved, money that had been meant for our future, for our child. The betrayal was too much to bear, yet I stood there, paralyzed, unable to move, unable to do anything but listen to his words. He was leaving. He was gone. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to force him to stay, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, all I could do was stand there, feeling the weight of the empty room pressing in on me. How had it all come to this? How had the life we built together disintegrated so quickly? Is there anything else you want to say? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I didn't expect an answer, but I couldn't stop myself from asking. I needed something, anything, that could explain what had happened, anything that could make sense of the wreckage he was leaving behind. James didn't respond. He didn't even look at me. He just kept packing, finishing what he had started with an eerie calmness, as if he had already said everything he needed to say. There was no anger in his voice, no emotion in his eyes, only the cold, detached expression of a man who had made up his mind. He turned to me one last time, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw something, maybe guilt, maybe remorse, but it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. He didn't speak again. He simply turned and walked out of the room, his suitcase in hand, leaving me standing there, alone, in the silence of the life we had once shared. I stood in the empty room for what felt like an eternity. The world outside seemed so far away, and yet everything felt so painfully close. The baby I carried, the child who would soon need a father, was now going to grow up without one. I thought of the future we had dreamed of, the home we had planned for our little one, the love we had once shared. And now, it was all gone. As I stood there, tears streaming down my face, something inside me shifted. A deep, quiet resolve began to rise within me. I couldn't change what James had done. I couldn't change the fact that he was leaving, that he was abandoning me when I needed him the most. But I could change what happened next. I could choose to fight. I could choose to fight for my child, for the future I was about to bring into this world. I would no longer let myself be a victim of this betrayal. I was stronger than that. I had to be. With trembling hands, I wiped my tears away and took a deep breath. I had a long road ahead of me, but I wouldn't walk it alone. I had my child, and I had myself. And that was enough. I would build a future, even if I had to do it on my own. James had made his choice. And now, it was time for me to make mine. Reading this story left me with a deep sense of heartbreak. The pain of betrayal, especially when it comes from someone you love and trust, is unimaginable. The protagonist's journey through the slow realization of her husband's emotional distance, followed by his shocking and cold departure, is so raw and real. The details, the bruises of betrayal, the coldness with which he explains taking her money, made my heart ache for her. What struck me the most was the protagonist's emotional strength, even though she didn't realize it at first. As her world crumbled around her, she found the courage to stand tall, for her child, and for herself. She had been brought to her knees by betrayal, but in those quiet moments of devastation, she found the resilience to rebuild, to find her power in the face of everything that was taken from her. The gut-wrenching moment when she stands there, pregnant, knowing that the man she thought she would spend her life with is leaving her for another woman, is so painfully relatable. It makes you think of all the broken dreams, the empty promises, and the unbearable weight of abandonment that many people, unfortunately, experience. I felt the protagonist's sorrow and anger, and at the same time, I admired her for finding a way to move forward despite the overwhelming betrayal. What really got to me was how James didn't even seem to feel the weight of what he was doing. The casualness of his departure, the complete indifference to the pain he was causing, was almost as painful as the betrayal itself. It's that coldness that made me feel a sense of righteous anger for her. I wanted to reach through the pages and tell her that she deserved better, that she was worth so much more than the man who abandoned her.